afternoon, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. Hope you're doing very well today, and welcome to another Grim gameplay, this one featuring Dredge, which I have to say is probably the most out of my wheelhouse out of any deck I have played on the channel before ever. So, prepare yourself for some punts, for some bad sequencing, and for some good times nevertheless, because that is what Grim gameplay is all about. And while I certainly don't know the intricacies, all the tricks of Dredge, I spend about 5 minutes looking some up before this. Maybe those will help me. I'm certainly not even probably at the intermediate level, much less the expert level yet. I'm about to take the run out for the first time here for you on camera. But anyway, Grim gameplay is nice for that, because it's a deck I would normally not really have much interest in playing through a league, but a patron wants to see me play it, and I can accommodate that very easily in the form of Grim gameplay, and also, I do have a wealth of experience at piloting midrange against it, and that's what the concluding segment will be for. It'll be very useful. Dredge is a nemesis of midrange. We'll get into, in the closing section, how exactly to approach this matchup and what to do. So, the patron question here is one of the most generous Marc-Andre Kurasinski. It's, he's been of the Veil many times, including right now the very highest tier of support, and even on very long hiatuses of Magic, Mark sticks around as a patron, is still at a lower tier. It's truly amazing, that type of support. So Mark, this is for you, my friend. I'm very happy that this format allows me to do things like this. The other thing, I'll tease this content, it's not coming for a while, because I need to upgrade my computer in order to run Arena, but Mark wants to be the first one having me play Arena content. If it was right now, it would be probably Rakdos midrange and Standard on Arena. That should be fun, and that'll have to wait till I upgrade my machine, right? This poor old machine that I put through so much, it's in need of replacing anyway, and the need to be able to do Arena on a machine that doesn't lag to hell and back is probably the last straw, so I'm getting on that soon. But until then, Mark, this Dredge GG is for you. So there's not much to say in the form of a deck tech. As far as I can tell, this is a relatively stock Dredge list, and you guys all know what Dredge does. I'll give you the very, very bare bones, but basically, we have a category of enablers here. Shriekhorn, Cathartic Reunion, and Haggle, the front half, or the adventure half, I guess, of Merchant of the Veil. These cards put other cards into the graveyard. Once you have done that, there are all these cards with the Dredge mechanic, and those fill up the graveyard even more. Along the way, you can also put cards like Prized Amalgam, Bloodghast, and Narcomoeba into the yard. Narcomoeba is basically an enabler for Amalgam in the same way that Bloodghast is. These are kind of the skirmishers, the scouting forces, if you will. They're hasty, they have evasion. Bloodghast is recursive, and Prized Amalgam is the heavy infantry. It's slower, it enters the battlefield tapped, it doesn't have evasion, but it's a 3-3. And this stuff doesn't look very impressive, and in a vacuum it's not, but in practice the way it works in this deck is you just flood the board with recursive threats that are hard to interact with. The ways that you get them in the graveyard are also hard to interact with, and they just keep coming, and they swarm the battlefield really quickly. Creeping Chill is basically a free Lightning Helix, or a very slow and inefficient Lightning Helix, depending on whether you put it into your graveyard from your library or whether you're hard casting it in the late game. But either way, it helps the aggro plan out. And Stinkweed Imp, Life from the Loam, Golgari Thug, as mentioned, these are the premier Dredge cards, and they all have other use cases. Stinky is another evasive attacker, and most notably, a very annoying blocker with pseudo Death Touch that the opponent doesn't want to trade with at all, because this is your best Dredge card. So imagine the value the Dredge player gets out of, getting Stinky into the graveyard, then dredging with it, putting it into hand, then putting it down, hard casting it on the battlefield, the opponent then being forced for some reason to trade with it, then you get to Dredge again. It is a total nightmare for any kind of a fair deck. Life from the Loam is another Dredge card and also enables you to kind of fuel your hand back up for big conflagrates, for example, or to just continue looping things like Forgotten Cave. It's got a lot of utility here. And Golgari Thug is a Dredge 4 with, and when it dies, ability that is actually probably not to your benefit at least some of the time, but other times it will be. The big text here, of course, though, is Dredge 4. Just a note on the art, I have opted for some secret layer printings with Thug and Bloodghast, and Merchant of the Veil. We've got a promo, we've got Future Sight and Archimedes. There's a lot of really cool cards, but it's not as cool as it would be if TSR was out, because then we'd have Old Bordered Stinkweed Imp and Prized Amalgam. That would be nice, but we're rocking some unset John Avon Mountains, and we've got all kinds of Zendikar Rising Expeditions all over the land base. Definitely a nice looking deck here. Rounding out the top end is Conflagrate, which is kind of a board wipe plus enabler rolled into one, and or finisher plus enabler. You can even cast this for 0 just to get it in the yard, getting ready to flashback it on turn 2 and dump your whole hand. It's not one of the more efficient starts, but it is a way to go off. And then Ox of Agonis, which is a really powerful and relatively recent addition that is also, just like a lot of other cards, both enabler and threat. Very, very nice stuff. In the sideboard, we are moving Heaven and Earth to prevent the opponent from locking out our graveyard. 4 copies of Nature's Claim is where you start doing that. This is the most universal answer. It's very efficient. Technically, we do care about them gaining 4 life, right? But in practice, we'll be able to kind of deterministically overrun that 4 life if we are going off. And you can also claim your own Shriekhorn in a spicy play, if that matters, right? After you've used up all 3, if the opponent's not presenting a claim target, well, let's gain 4 ourselves. Lightning Axe is also an enabler plus an answer. You can kill the opponent's Scavenging Ooze, for example, while also putting a key card into the graveyard. Ancient Grudge is claim number 5 through 6, does not hit enchantments, but also has 2-for-1 potential, or has the potential to simply be milled in the course of your dredging, and then you can flash it back from there. Blast Zone is a card that you can loop with Life from the Loam, so when it is a realistic interaction piece for the opponent, it should come in and definitely pull a lot of weight if you can find it early enough. 2 copies of Pithing Needle as well for I don't actually know what. We'll find out. We'll see if I feel the need to use them. Abrupt Decay, a catch-all answer, and good old Thoughtseize against opposing combo deck. So thank you to Mark-Andre Kurisinski for suggesting this Dredge list and for your generous support. Now, let's go play some Dredge to what I hope is at least a mediocre standard, and we're going to see how much we can accomplish with good old Stinkweed Imp and company. Let's go. I'll keep this one on the draw. I don't like the 2 Creeping Chills in hand, but I think it's a little difficult to turn down Shriekhorn into Life from the Loam. We don't have any enormous synergy with Life from the Loam either, but we're hoping the Shriekhorn basically does a lot of work, and the hand's functional enough that I'm going to keep it. Snow-Covered Island out of the opponent. Interesting. Let's get all of our stuff popped out here. Opponent opting in response to our Shriekhorn, looking like a blue-white control deck. Maybe they're digging for a Force of Negation. They don't have it. Alright, I think we're going to Shriekhorn on the opponent's maybe the end of their second main phase. Is that how you're supposed to do this? Let's make sure we have a stop there. Sure. Again, I claim absolutely no expertise. There's an Archimedes. Yup. And a Stinkweed Imp. What a nice Shriekhorn activation. So, are we supposed to activate, or are we supposed to just dredge with Stinky? We already have a good dredger, so I'm gonna not. But maybe if there's another Narcomoeba hit, we could have responded with a Shriekhorn activation, right? Anyway, so we have another Stinkweed Imp in there. Alright, I'm gonna main phase a Shriekhorn now. See what we hit, but probably just going to fetch again and cast Life from the Loam. There is a Bloodghast. Sure. So do we even need to fetch? 1. Yeah, we do to get a 3rd land to buy back. Sure. Yep. Maybe you turn on opponent's permission a little bit this way, that's totally fine. Doesn't really change all that much as far as I can tell. We're definitely going off. We're definitely presenting a big, big problem for them. So I think once again we're supposed to just go to our draw, Dredge Stinkweed Imp, and then maybe respond with a Shriekhorn trigger. Alright, there's a Creeping Chill, Bloodghast, whatever, we'll do it now. There's not necessarily a need to, but... Okay, we got a bunch of Bloodghasts. Not much else going on. Yeah, no Ox, no Conflagrate. Yeah, so we'll get these Bloodghast back. They could be sweeping us next, but we're going to make them have a sweeper. And I also think I'm going to hardcast a Stinkweed Imp, which, if they do have a sweeper, will kind of punish them for that. And again, we have another Stinky in there, but... And if they don't have a sweeper, we're just presenting another weenie, right? Opponent pathing a Bloodghast. You got it. So we're out of basics. Okay, interesting. As I've said, I'm sure there will be so many positions where I really don't know what I'm doing optimally. So far, I feel our decisions have been relatively straightforward, and the thing about Dredge is, even if you're not playing it optimally, you will definitely have a lot. Like, even bad Dredge sequencing is still going to be going off in such a way that the opponent might not be able to do enough to keep up with it, right? So, do we want to Dredge 5, or do we want to get life from the loam back? I think we're going to do a bigger Dredge. But I'm sure there's at least some incentive to get life from the loam back. And still, you know, no Ox, no Conflagrate. Not much to do out of the graveyard. Which is a little unfortunate. Okay, Snap Path. Sure. So opponent basically playing a fair game against us, which is usually a good sign for Dredge. We're going to try to resolve a Creeping Chill in the second main just to speed up our clock. But, you know, Path to Exile definitely doing some good work against us. I do hope I'm not missing anything that I can be doing. Alright, so now we get to actually buy back Amalgam and Bloodghast, which is kind of cool. Or rather, we get to buy Bloodghast back, which will return Amalgam. Very nice, very nice. And once more, if the opponent sweeps us, then we just Dredge Stinkweed Imp again. We'll definitely hit Conflagrate or Ox soon enough, even if we don't hit the right combo of cards to go off. And they bin a Supreme Verdict, perhaps recognizing that, but really, what else can they have? Maybe they have to, like, loop Cryptic for long enough to stick Planeswalker or something like this. We'll find out. In any case, Life from the Loam is the only Dredge option we have now, and there's a couple Narcomoebas, sure. We're not hitting things in the perfect order, even I can tell that, but we're still definitely doing a lot of work here. Let's go to attacks first, I guess. Gotta be a Cryptic. If they bin the Verdict, it's gotta be a Cryptic, right? They're just gonna concede. Good enough for me. Yep, classic fair deck, unable to keep up with dredging in G1. Happens all the time. I think I want Thought Seizes and Nature's Claims here is pretty much where my head's at. You can see a Pithing Needle too. I don't know if I'm supposed to play that. I'm going to bring in all 4 claims because I suspect RIP is possible. Even if it's not, they showed us Search for Azcanta, right? I think maybe cutting it like a Cathartic Reunion makes sense against the control deck. Other than that, maybe we trim around the edges here a little bit. Yeah, just going to do some edge trimming, and it might not be strictly correct or even close, but gotta cut some things, right? And yeah, I'll cut an Ox. Sure. Well, we cut a Cathartic Reunion, but we begin with 2 in hand. I'll keep it. We got 3 lands and 3 enablers and a Bloodgust. It's not the greatest, but it's actually got a lot of redundancy against permission. And even if they don't have permission, it's got a significant success rate anyway if we get, like, lucky hits off Shriekhorn, for example. So we'll begin there. And once again, I mean, I don't know what the normal protocol is, but to me, from the outside perspective of never having played Dredge before, it makes sense to do this on the opponent's second main phase. Okay, no rip. No white in general. So, second main, because I think there's something with the triggers here, like if we get to return something, if we do it on the end step, it'll come back on our end step, right? Alright, so we just brick. I'm going to go again looking for a Dredger, but if not, we'll just try to resolve Cathartic Reunion. Ooh, we brick more. Yikes. And we draw Creeping Chill, so this is how things definitely fall apart, I would say. Because I expect this first Reunion to get countered, and then we're going to have kind of our backs up against the wall here. There's no way to hardcast Narcomoeba, so I might as well bin this, but it doesn't do anything in there. So the problem is we're stumbling this much and we haven't encountered any hate, right, from the opponent. So with them lacking hate and with us keeping 7, we should be really going off. Maybe I should have mulled, but I'm thinking that was a good keep. I think we just got some real bad hits off Shriekhorn. Once again, I'm going to look for a Dredge card by going in the upkeep, and once again, we're going to fail. Wow. And we brick with the basic lands, so at least we get to do the Bloodgast and Amalgam thing, which we will. And then we'll try for another Reunion. Once again, I do kind of expect it to get countered, but let's pitch our whole hand. Alright. With nothing to dredge, it's just a natty draw 3, so we churn through the deck. And I left black open in case we drew Thoughtseize, but we didn't. It's 2 more lands and a Life from the Loam. We do have the potential to establish a Life from the Loam Forgotten Cave loop, which is kind of cool. But I think with even, like, slightly below par hits off of Shriekhorn, we would be just kind of swamping the opponent again like we did in Game 1. Alright, so Prized Amalgam is now second from the top. Interesting. Good to know. And nothing we can do besides take a natural draw of Creeping Chill. Alright, so let's play Arid Mesa because there's another fetchable or 2. Let's buy back Mountain, Forgotten Cave, and Copperline Gorge, I guess. Or try to. Either way, getting a Dredge card in the graveyard this way, better late than never. I think I'm supposed to shuffle away Amalgam with Arid Mesa. Unless maybe Life from the Loam stays, then we can dredge it into the graveyard, but it's only a Dredge 3. So I wonder about that. Okay. Well, we can always shuffle it away now and then dredge now, so I guess that's what we'll do. Or should we just dredge because we know it's a decent one to have on top? I'm not sure, guys. I don't want to tank too long for your sake or for the opponent's sake here. So I'm just going to have fun, take actions, while giving you my thoughts, such as they are. I guess we're kind of punished for it, because we only hit the Amalgam and then 2 other bricks, right? I'm just going to shuffle to thin out here, or fetch to thin out here, and fill up the graveyard more. No rip in sight from the opponent. I know there are reasons to keep fetches uncracked, but in this case... Alright. So I think I'm going to lead on Life from the Loam. Basically going for counter magic bait here. Should maybe have played a land first to beat Mono League, but at the same time, if they Mono League this, I think that's probably good. Oh man, this is too skill testing for my first time out, but that resolves. Cool. Alright. So now we're going to play a land. I'm going to cycle just to Dredge 3. Still bricking. I think we're just going to keep kind of generating quote-unquote value with this Life from the Loam, right? This might be all wildly incorrect, by the way. But this is where my head's at with this stuff. I think if nothing else, we kind of time walk the opponent this way. Shadow of Doubt? Whoa, Spice. Okay. I'm left feeling that I played that turn incorrectly, but, like, we just are unusually flooded. Yeah, I don't think Cathartic Reunion does much more than the Life from the Loam would have done there. Good to know about Shadow of Doubt for Game 3, which I still think there probably is going to be, despite us, you know, not really getting punished so far for what's going on, but OP with Jace, that is a bit scary. So the thing is, they're mostly tapped out now. We can have a really good go-off turn, finally, if our deck at last decides to comply. We'll begin once again with a Dredge, I guess. Narcomoeba, Creeping Chill, Ox of Agonis, now we're talking. Alright, in response to Narcomoeba, I think I should... Should I cycle Forgotten Cave here? Or is there enough in the graveyard? I will. Merchant of the Veil. Oh, we're already in our draw step. Maybe I played that wrong. Anyway, whatever, let's just let this resolve. This is a tricky spot. I think I'm going to haggle into Life from the Loam here. We got another Ox and a Stinkweed Imp. We can hardcast Merchant. Alright, probably time to go for a Cathartic Reunion then. Because we have Stinkweed Imp in there now. pitching Life from the Loam and just a land, I guess. Alright, does opponent have Force of Negation, Spell Snare, Spell Pierce, something like this? Pierce we could beat. Spell Snare, nice, okay. So now I'm just going to go for an Ox, I guess. Trying to exile things that don't matter and otherwise not worrying too much about it. I probably put those triggers in the wrong order. Whatever. Stinkweed Imp. Creeping Chill. Do we get a Life from the Loam back to diversify? I think I will. But maybe it's better to just go for all the imps. And that's the game, opponent conceding to that. Wow! Good stuff. Or maybe did they just actually DC, or is this actually a concession? Well, I'll wait it out. We'll find out. We'll, obviously cut the video here, but I think the opponent may be conceding to this, unless they have some strangely coincidental timing going on, right? But this looks like the type of thing, based on their progression, that again didn't have hard hate, that the blue-white control deck cannot recover from. Good times. Alright, this hand has no enablers and a good amount of air, and it's mono-red mana too, so lots of reasons to mulligan. And that's what we'll do. Alright, opponent keeping 7, we have a no-land. 6, down to 5 we go. Alright, I see 2 lands. That's a good start. We see Life from the Loam, Cathartic Reunion. I think this one's got to be a keep. An easy putback of Creeping Chill, and then... it's probably tempting to say Prized Amalgam. But, Life from the Loam technically not doing anything really for us quite yet, but it is the only Dredge card, so we have to keep it. But in terms of other utility, so yeah, we'll put back in Amalgam. Very, very interesting, though. I'm sure there are some sequences that we can draw off the top that reward us for keeping both Amalgams. Ox of Agonis. Alright, so do we try to just resolve Cathartic Reunion? I think so. Against a Scalding Tarn deck. Still going to pitch Loam and Amalgam. I'm assuming we'll be able to pitch Ox at some other point. Amalgam's not hard castable in the deck. Alright, there's Life from the Loam. Okay, Creeping Chill, Narcomoeba. That's some good hits. And we're also developing more functionality in our hand as well. So that was a nice Cathartic Reunion for sure. We've all seen better ones, right? But given our mull to 5 and our relatively underwhelming hand when we cast it, I'll take it. Rogran Triome, another control deck. Man, control's still very much alive and well in my relatively limited game time since the bans, of course, but I'm hearing that from a lot of people anecdotally as well. Okay, more haggles. So, should I have done something? Maybe I should have haggled on the upkeep to dredge on the draw step, huh? That was probably correct. Or we could have at least thought about it. Anyway, let's go for a haggle now. Still pretty good draws, these, you have to say. See if the opponent counters it. There's a Stinkweed Imp. Alright, let's go for another haggle, I guess. Keep this train going. It's possible that at some point it would have been correct to put an Ox in the graveyard, right? But I almost feel like I'm playing more of a value game this way. Maybe this is a mid-range instinct kicking in. Maybe it's just incorrect, though. Maybe that... Maybe I should have haggled away Ox rather than Life from the Loam there. I think that's actually probably correct, because we already were dredging with Stinkweed Imp, obviously. And getting Ox in the graveyard is like a big finisher, almost, against whatever the opponent's up to. At the same time, it's game one. We're against control. We have functionality on the play. I think the opponent's going to be relatively hard-pressed to stop us, but stranger things indeed have happened. Let's see what they've got here on turn 3. They haven't really done anything yet. Teferi. Yup. Bouncing Amalgam. Pretty annoying stuff, you have to say. Alright, big Dredge off of Stinky. We get Creeping Chill. I see Amalgam, I see Conflagrate. I think so far so good, right? Looking pretty powerful. And we cannot quite kill the opponent, but we're very close with Conflagrate, plus the Narcomoeba hit. So are we supposed to do that? We could also... There might have been another line where we dredge Life from the Loam and then cast Life from the Loam, and then cast Conflagrate and win. Either way, it's going to be hard to lose from here, so I guess I'm just going to do a big old Conflagrate. 1, 2, 3... 2, 3. How does this work? Sure, I think like that, right? Sorry as always about the slow play here. First time out. Hey, we got the winner. First ever game with Dredge. That's cool. And we're on our way to winning game 1 of the second ever match with Dredge. Oh, I'm sorry, were we... No, we were 1 away from the kill if we ignored Teth, that's right. I think it's correct to leave them at 2 rather than at 1. Although, maybe I'm punished because now they have a fetch land for their 4th land. Admittedly, I didn't think about that enough. But I'm thinking, Teferi with the instant speed verdict potential was a big issue, but... Oh, we're so punished because it's Polymorph combo. If I'd just ignored Teferi, they'd probably be dead. Or at least they wouldn't have been able to combo off on us. Wow. Look at the cards. Look at the cards. And here's Emrakul. And I guess... Well... Actually... Alright. I mean, they're still just dead to a whole lot. Just gotta try to hit a Creeping Chill, I guess. Oops, misclick, meant to hit the imp there. Alright, we hit the chills anyway, GG. So, some very clumsy play from yours truly, as we knew we were signing up for. Polymorph combo, not what I read them for. If I had, maybe putting them to 1 is a big, big consideration. I mentioned that it didn't matter at all, or it didn't seem to matter at all. In fact, the opposite was true, right? It mattered significantly, but this is the beauty of a linear deck. You know, you can just play suboptimally, make them have it, and in this case, they didn't have enough to beat us, even though they kind of did their combo thing on turn 4. So I'm thinking about Thoughtseizes, Pithing Needles, and maybe like 2 copies of Nature's Claim. Maybe only 1 needle, something like this. I don't know exactly what my best cards to shave are, so we'll be a little bit more conservative. Once again, I kind of like trimming a reunion. And then otherwise, we're trimming around the edges in probably a similar way as we did to the blue-white control opponent in round 1. I don't know if it's ever really correct to shave a Narcomoeba. How could it be correct to shave good old Narcomoeba? We'll do something like this. Opponent will mull, we will keep. We're haggling away a Stinkweed Imp on turn 1. And it is an instant speed effect, so we could play around counter magic at the same time. Letting them make the second land drop is probably bad, so I think I'm just going to main phase it. Ooh, or we have Thoughtseize. On the draw, maybe we're supposed to Thoughtseize here. I think I'm going to, just to beat Rest in Peace, basically, right? And also to punish their mulligan a little bit more. It's definitely playing a little bit scared. There's definitely some scope to just make them have it, but draw of Thoughtseize seems nice, and there's the rip. Woo! Okay, hey, I might be a terrible Dredge player, but I'm a good midrange player, and that just was an example of knowing when, you know, knowing the power of Thoughtseize, right? So, and then I go back to being a bad Dredge player by not going on the upkeep with Merchant of the Veil yet again. But, hey, guess what? We just draw a Cathartic Reunion anyway, never didn't have it. So now we get a higher upside play that's going to resolve. So clearly I know exactly what I'm doing. How could you ever doubt? How could you ever doubt? And we have so many good cards to ditch. I guess it's Imp. And Amalgam, but it once again could be Ox very easily. Could be Conflagrate as well. Okay, Life from the Loam. Okay, Life from the Loam. We're going off. Let's go. And we're rewarded for pitching Amalgam because Narcomoeba has been found as well. Some nice stuff, my friends. Some real nice stuff. Opponent can bolt something here to slow us down, I guess, but it's obviously not a very winning line. They're just going to try to find the combo pieces ASAP, of course, and alright, so there is nothing to dredge left, so I think I'm supposed to haggle away something, but an alternative line is Life from the Loam. Like, what if we hardcast Life from the Loam, buy back the lands, make a land drop, then try to haggle? I don't know what's more optimal here. I think I'm going to go for the haggle just to keep going with the Imp. But that might not be correct. Well, correct or not, I think we're rewarded again because we get some good hits. Another Amalgam, another Narcomoeba, Creeping Chill is fine. I'm definitely not using Life from the Loam optimally, though. I should be, like, pulling ahead on land drop, or continuing to make land drops as well, right? Haven't really succeeded in that. I think I'm just going to put Conflagrate in the bin. How do you cast it for 0? How do you cast this card for 0? Oh, man. Okay, can I type 0 here? Okay. It's not letting me do it. Alright, sorry about that, guys. That is just me not understanding this deck. Not only sequentially, but also in terms of how to execute the mechanics on MTGO. And once again, I'm not going to waste OP's time here, or yours. And I don't think it's that necessary to put Conflagrate in the bin, but it's not really necessary to have it in hand either, so I was going to just use my mana efficiently, right? But let's get another big one with Stinky. We're hitting all the creeping chills, which is great here under our circumstances. And yeah, if we had the Conflagrate in the bin, we might have the kill here. As it is, I think I'm just going to go for the Ox. Doesn't feel like it matters what we do right now, so I'm just going to take an action. We can hit one more Creeping Chill, and that would present lethal, right? If I'm not mistaken. That's my main reason for doing so. Imp, and let's get a life from the loam now, just in case we need that for grinding, but there's the chill. Alright, we did it. Unless they have another bolt, but that's the game. So sorry for stumbling through that, definitely didn't play optimally, but hey, the power of linearity, let's go. Dredge is just kind of running over everybody. Alright, I think we keep the Shriekhorn hand most of the time with 2 lands, right? It's never great to see an Archamoeba in hand, especially when you don't have a blue source to cast it. I guess I've been saying it's uncastable along with Amalgam. We do actually have 1 Gemstone Mine, so I probably should take that back. But we do... Whoa, Glimmer Void. Glimmer Void. Inquisition. Woo! What are we up to over there? I don't know, but I bet they take Shriekhorn. Yeah, that's the only take that makes sense, right? This is going to force us to go turn 1 Oh, but I don't know how to cast Conflagrate for 0 on MTGO. I tried last game. But yeah, if we spend 1 mana, X equals 0, put it in the graveyard, and then next turn we can go off with a massive Conflagrate to dump our hand and dome the opponent, and then we'll start dredging on turn 3. That's the idea. They take Conflagrate. Okay. Well, now we don't have to... now we don't have to worry about how to cast it for 0. Now we just get to play a Shriekhorn. I'm going to follow the same pattern that I have done thus far, which is Shriekhorn on the end of the opponent's second main phase, when there's nothing else in the graveyard going on. Hopefully, at least that I am doing optimally, but I remain uncertain of even that. Glimmer Void is such a cool land. This has always been one of my favorite lands, visually and thematically. And it's also epic that you can, like, you know, Shatterstorm the opponent's board, and then they have to sack Glimmer Void too. So they Stirrings into another Glimmer Void, knowing how nice it is. And are we? I guess we're against Lantern. That makes a lot of sense, actually. And I have to assume this is a pretty good matchup in most ways, although I don't know if we can actually beat Ensnaring Bridge very well. That might be the big difference maker here, whether or not they have a bridge early enough. We have Creeping Chill. We're going to need those, I assume, to win here, certainly through bridge, but the idea will be to attack them low enough to the point where we then finish with Chill, right? Nevertheless, Golgari Thug, a fine hit. We'll Dredge here. Alright, so do we Shriekhorn now? Probably. Shriekhorn now, see what's up. Amalgam Imp. Alright, I'm going to do the Conflagrate thing. It's a great hand to pitch, all in all. One, two, three, four, five. Okay. Red. Should it be 4 and should we keep our mountain? I don't know, so I'm just going to do another point of damage. That's probably wrong, though. Let the record state that I'm starting to realize a couple of things like this as I play, that maybe keeping the mountain makes more sense than dealing an extra 1, but whatever. We're all in, baby. We're all in on the big Conflagrate, excuse me. Now, of course, the idea will be that next turn we get to Dredge Imp, Shriekhorn with triggers on the stack if need be, and overwhelm the opponent from here. We have a second Conflagrate in the deck, and I was going to say, even if they play Bridge this turn, we should be able to still have the kill lined up, in theory. In practice, their Lantern could help prevent that, right? Fascinating to see Lantern control again. Hasn't been seen much in the wake of Mox Opal, although I've heard it said that like Karn the Great Creator killed it even more than Mox Opal being banned did. It's also a very time-consuming and probably pretty difficult deck to play. Soapy about to draw an Urza. Got it. Let the Bauble trigger resolve. They have another Bauble, huh? Alright, let's just Dredge Stinkweed Imp. Nothing good. And, oh man, if I kept the mountain, we'd be getting Bloodghast and Amalgams back, so that's just bad. Now let's Shriekhorn just like looking for an Ox or the second Conflagrate. But one of them is going to be Cathartic Reunion, which is pretty bad. So I definitely should have just kept the mountain in hand. Like I said, I had noticed it. I even noticed it before I finished clicking, so I don't really know what I was doing. Just being cavalier, basically. Bad play. There's still every chance that we do just win, right? Because it's Dredge game 1 and because we had a relatively explosive start. P-Fine and discard off the top at a bad time. But they're filtering it all away. Making land drops, I guess. Is there anything besides Stinkweed Imp that we should dredge? Golgari Thug is the only other one. Again, there is consideration always for Life from the Loam that I've been underusing, I can tell. But I don't see any reason to dredge Thug over Imp. Thopter Foundry. Okay. Combo is getting assembled. We are bricking, but it's just my fault. If we had a mountain, we'd have had them basically dead by now. But still unlucky here to brick on, like an Ox or another Conflagrate, which would let us really just take it to the house. Also bricking on a Narcomoeba. Lots of good hits we have had off these last couple Dredge 5s that we have not managed to land. And here comes Urza. Yup. Yup. I think we're still supposed to take this Dredge with a Thug. There's a Creeping Chill and an Ox. Alright, doing some stuff now. Ox of Agonis really OP, and also probably a card that saves you from bad play, right? That's definitely my impression anyway thus far. Too funny. Alright, Ox. Probably makes sense to put these on the stack first, maybe doesn't matter. But I think we want to resolve the Ox trigger before the other triggers, on average. Alright, we found an Archamoeba, nice. Alright, at this point I'll take back a life from the loam just in case we somehow fail from here, but I think we probably have them, don't you? And of course, by far the hardest part, I would imagine, of playing Dredge, once you're used to it, which I'm not, is remembering all your triggers. And online, yeah, it does it for you, right? Definitely does it for you. So we just have to fade the combo, basically. There's even a Conflagrate in the yard, so I guess we can even beat Ensnaring Bridge over the course of a couple turns, maybe. So once again, some really ugly play for me, but hey, for once we're not behind on the clock. That's a minor miracle. So opponent's going to have a lot of ways to dig toward the combo, and they're getting really unlucky. They're seeing a lot of lands on top and a lot of discard spells, but oh no, there it is. There's Sword of the Meek. But is it enough? Do they have enough mana to really go off here? What happened? My client froze a bit, and now suddenly it's a little bit different. I guess they did shuffle with Lantern? Yeah, because we don't have this revealed anymore. Alright. So Urza making infinite Thopters here. Or making infinite mana off of the Thopters, right? Alright, I don't know if I fully understand that turn, partially because I kind of missed what happened, but let's just dredge with an imp. There's a Creeping Chill. Alright, I'm just going to kill Urza with this Conflagrate, I think. There are definitely other ways to do this. This is the way I'm going to do it. I'm really not sure that the opponent played this optimally, but I guess I don't have full info. I don't know if we saw, I don't remember or know if I saw what they had on top when they did decide to shuffle with Lantern. I'm assuming they, I don't know if this tells us here. I'm assuming they targeted themselves, right? It doesn't make much sense to make us shuffle blind. But, I mean, opponent throwing away their whole board on the block and still going to 1, obviously a pretty good outcome for us. If we'd done something different with that Conflagrate, we maybe could have had them dead. At the same time, I don't imagine they can beat this board any longer. Yeah, so they did end up with sort of the Meek that we saw. I don't remember where we saw that. Yeah, that's the game. All right, that was a weird one. Like I said, I'm not convinced that that was optimally done, frankly, from either side. But we have a lot to do here. Ancient Grudge. I'm probably going to play a Thoughtseized. We'll play all the claims. Going to play a Lightning Axe and an Abrupt Decay and a Pithing Needle. This is definitely overboarding. I also think we can play a Blast Zone over... Is it greedy to play it over a Fetch Land? Let's play it over Forgotten Cave. We'll trade one form of utility for another. So I think because I'm going so heavy with the sideboarding, I am supposed to side out the free Creeping Chills, because otherwise we're going to side way too far away from, the core of the deck. So I'm going to do similar edge trimming as I have heretofore in the league. However, I am just siding out all chills. This has been a very strange debut. Let's actually get rid of an Ox, I guess. But we'll see how we do with this post-side. It seems like it's hard to lose with 4 Claim, 2 Grudge, and a Decay, but I might find a way. Well, it is a 1-lander, but it has double Nature's Claim and a lot of other good stuff, so I am going to keep it. Gonna be happy to kind of interact with them early, right? If we just draw the second land naturally off the top, maybe we just go full race mode with the claims in the back pocket, but until then, I think this hand has relatively few fail rates. The only real fail rate being, again, failing to draw that second land. Even so, Shriekhorn could conceivably do enough work on its own. Plus, we have claim to interact with the opponent. I think Haggle might be a good draw as well, but really we just want the second land. They're going to go for Thopter Foundry. They are. That's a great Nature's Claim target, obviously. So, Shriekhorn now. Hopefully we don't mill lands. We mill 2. Bruh. Alright, well. Claim here. Once again, I'm going to Shriekhorn on the end step, I guess. We get their Glimmer Void. That's spicy. Very spicy. Hey, I mentioned that in game 1, right? It's possible we should have Shriekhorned on the upkeep there. Okay, Lantern of Insight, yep. Ooh. Will opponents sack the Lantern to shuffle, and they will instead call us a name and concede the match? Alright, well, absolutely wrecked by Nature's Claim. Hey, this is going to be even cooler in Old Border. There you go. And hey, these were my first 3 games with Dredge. 3 easy wins despite me obviously misplaying a lot. Well, my friends, better lucky than good, am I right? Better linear than good. Maybe that is even more of a relevant takeaway. So, those were some, those were some amateur sequences from yours truly, but we don't drop a single game despite that, and, I don't even feel like we really had nut draws. It's just the power of Dredge. Really hard strategy to stop overall, so now I can retire, and I can say, yeah, I played Dredge. I'm a Dredge player, and I've literally never lost a game, so, if you need any advice, you can just line up to ask me, because my credentials are off the charts. But in all seriousness, we did see, again, the power of Dredge as a strategy. And like I said at the beginning, there's a lot to know with this deck in terms of sequencing optimally, but even if you're just kind of, blundering your way through it, you're still going to get a high percentage of the optimum performance out of the deck. It plays itself to a high floor, and then the high ceiling is where expertise comes in, and we saw that today. So these games were for you, Mark. Thank you once again, and forgive me for I have been remiss, and I did not shout out our new patrons at the beginning of the video. Let's do that real quick. Now we have 4 brand new Inquisitors. We have Izod, Joshua W., Scott Mascudi, and Maja Milakanovic. And I hope I got all of your names correct, especially the last one. And speaking of Maja, she has become a patron and written to me on behalf of her significant other, another patron, a long-term supporter, Rocco Perisic. And if that is not devotion, I don't know what is, so big shout out to Rocco and to Maja, all the best to both of you. Thank you to all patrons, new and old, for your support. Thank you also to Erwin Lopez, who is back up to the Unearthed tier from the Inquisitor tier, where he's been for a minute. And thank you once again, of course, to Marc-Andre Kurasinski. Now, let's talk about how to beat Dredge with Midrange. Well, my friends, if you didn't know really at all how Dredge worked, hopefully that gameplay, in my inexperienced hands admittedly, does give you closer, brings you closer a little bit to understanding exactly what the deck is up to. But let's get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty in terms of how to oppose it. We're going to talk about tactical considerations, specific play patterns against specific cards, and also broad strategic considerations. And, we're just going to kind of bounce a little bit between the two as we go left to right, basically, for the most part, across the 75. So just looking at the land base to begin with, a few things to note. Number one, there is a high dependence on fetch lands in terms of getting the right mana, in terms of filling up the graveyard. You know how important fetches are to, for example, escape Kroxa in Jundor and Rakdos. Well, there's escape cards here too. It works for that. It works for Life from the Loam as well. Fetch lands, very important. Thing that brings to my mind first is Ashiok Dreamrender, who is wonderful, but a little bit slow on its own as far as graveyard hate goes, but also does a surprising amount of work in terms of shutting off those fetches. It's good. It's a good static hate piece against this deck, especially on the play, as well as obviously the main attraction, which is the repeated -1 to clear out the graveyard, and often milling the Dredge player will be correct, although we're talking about from the BGX perspective mostly here. Of course, milling yourself can be very, very good too, especially if you're on a turn 2 Goyf into turn 3 Ashiok progression, so use judgment there. But, leaving all of these fetch lands aside, I guess before we leave them aside, we have only 19 lands, including 9 fetch lands here, and 4 shock lands. And one of the remaining 19 lands is a gemstone mine, which cannot be used cavalierly forever under most circumstances, although it is another thing that can be bought back with Life from the Loam. But the point here in mentioning all of the aforementioned is that the Dredge players actually hurt their life total a great deal. That's one of many reasons Creeping Chill has been a wonderful addition to the deck ever since it's been printed. But leaving the Creeping Chill free Lightning Helixes aside, you actually can find the Dredge player doing a lot of damage to their life total. It's not something that is necessarily going to spring to mind when you look at this deck, or even when you think about how to approach it, but that's just another reason the aggressive stance. Turn 2 Tarmogoyf, very, very good. Obviously not as good as Scavenging Ooze, assuming it goes unanswered, but still very, very good. And more broadly, zooming out to the strategic perspective, I actually really like my matchup here a lot more on Rock than I do on Jund. And a big reason is that Rock has got flush with green mana, and the green mana is relatively painless. These are great things to leverage. And also, you have a higher density of just beefy green threats, right? Scavenging Ooze is not even necessarily stock anymore in Jund, but it's usually a 3 of in Rock. I do like the matchup here with Rock against Dredge. It's not necessarily favored. I think it's close to 50-50, assuming you have a reasonable density of graveyard hate. But Rock is one of those decks where you can go Inquisition into Skoos and play a fair game against Dredge, and even on the draw, that can be good enough. On the play, I'm feeling confident if I go discard into Scavenging Ooze, right? But back to their land base. Forgotten Cave. Forgotten Cave, obviously, the idea is you can buy it back with Life from the Loam and keep dredging with it. You know, you're going to cycle it, but instead of drawing, they will use the replacement effect to dredge. But even if you have them kind of locked out from doing that one way or another, or making it, not necessarily attractive to do that, just like looping Forgotten Cave and getting card advantage with Life from the Loam, even if it's only in the form of lands, this is actually good against a mid-range deck where it's, definitely too dirtily, or they don't care so much about that relatively weak card advantage against most other archetypes. So do respect that, and do realize that Forgotten Cave is definitely part of what can bury you on a value access. And speaking of that, and speaking of the lands in general, with Scavenging Ooze. So your play patterns are very, very interesting with good old Skoos. We have to split the difference between holding up effects, when by effects I mean, of course, the activated ability, and using them more proactively. And, oftentimes on the end step it will be correct, unless maybe they leave a Shriekhorn untapped, to tap out and, clean up their graveyard with Scavenging Ooze. Again, if nothing else, Ox of Agonis sends that incentive. The more cards you clear out of the graveyard, the better off you will be. So obviously in this regard, we will be prioritizing taking away dredge cards and taking away payoffs like Prized Amalgam. More on that in a little bit. But, with all due respect to Merchant of the Veil, gaining a life and growing the Skoos, that's definitely nice. The next category of card to take away with Skoos is probably lands, especially Forgotten Cave. Remember that these are good Life from the Loam targets. Life from the Loam, buying back 3 lands can do a whole lot. It can fuel a bigger conflagrate, one that could even mean the death of Skoos. So, taking away lands, especially again Forgotten Cave, definitely solid. And in terms of attacking their land base, it's not usually going to be a winning strategy in my view. And there is a school of thought that says Assassin's Trophy is better than Maelstrom Pulse and Abrupt Decay in this matchup because you can attack the land base. I don't really subscribe to that, but if you do find yourself leaving trophies in, do note that 2 or sometimes even only 1 basic land is relatively stock, so you can get some mileage out of fields especially, but also maybe trophying the land if they had to mull deep and they've got a weird keep. On the other hand, it feels real bad to trophy a Shriekhorn on the play because you're going to give them that second land, and that's going to be very, very bad. On the whole, I would rather decay the Shriekhorn, and I'm taking mostly the rock perspective here, but the cards like Abrupt Decay and Fatal Push actually play reasonably well in the specific context of rock, because you do have the Skoozes and the Spell Bombs to clean them up, and you do have a realistic chance of playing a fair game against them and giving them the land off of trophy, especially because it can cheap Bloodghasts out for them if they didn't otherwise have a land drop, is definitely some downside here. But that said, their land base is painful, it's fragile, it's vulnerable to disruption in a few ways, and under some unusual circumstances, you can kind of basic check them out of the game. But moving on to broader strategic concerns. So this category of cards right here, these are what I call enablers. We have Shriekhorn, Cathartic Reunion, and Haggle, aka Merchant of the Veil, and these are the cards that get other cards in the graveyard. They have a form of card selection in this regard, except maybe Shriekhorn, and thus these are the prime discard targets. Now, the other times that you'll be taking other cards away, obviously if they don't have anything in hand that is in this category, you'll have to take something else occasionally that can be actively bad for you. If you find yourself poised between taking a Dredge card or taking an uncastable Narcomoeba, just take away the Narcomoeba, don't give them a Dredge card, right? That should probably be obvious, but again, Dredge is so unorthodox and unintuitive that maybe it's worth saying. Maybe that will help somebody. Another obviously good target would be whatever sideboard tech they've gotten against you. Lightning Axe is the best card they have in most Dredge sideboards against BGX midrange, because they know that you are turning creatures sideways. They'll be very happy to Lightning Axe a Bob, to Lightning Axe a Goyf before it survives it, and especially to Lightning Axe a Scavenging Ooze, right? But they, I could definitely see them siding in an Abrupt Decay, and usually some number of Nature's Claims, maybe not all 4 though. And one reason Lightning Axe is so important for them is because lots of our hate pieces are on legs and do not die to claim. And then, occasional thought seizes out of the Dredge player, certainly not unheard of. Do not be terribly surprised with that. But back to resolving your own thought seizes. I like to leave all discard spells in against Dredge, and that might surprise some of you, because obviously they want their graveyard full. You lose tempo and trade 1 for 1 to put a card in the graveyard. In general, that seems terrible against Dredge, and it is. But in practice, if you're able to Inquisition or Thoughtseize one of these enablers very often you will leave them completely crippled until they top deck another enabler, or until they get going some other way. And just slowing this deck down, getting yourself the time to get your legs underneath you, or maybe even to start racing. You don't even necessarily need to get time to set up Graveyard Hate. You can go Inquisition into Goyf, and if they stumble for a turn and you're on the play, yeah, you can probably win that race, right? You can probably win that race unless they hit some really nutty dredges. So with that in mind, taking away these enablers is almost always correct with your discard, and leaving in all of your discard effects is almost always correct. If you're playing more than stock, if you're playing like 7 or 8, maybe you can start trimming, but I think I still like 6 most of the time, and I would even go so far as to say I like a Collective Brutality or 2 in most BGX shells on the play, specifically because it can take away Cathartic Reunion, and the other modes can be relevant as well. Certainly, you will often just want the tempo from escalating, and if Cathartic Reunion is in hand, it feels great to go turn 1, target a discard, take the Shriekhorn, turn 2, Brutality, away the Reunion. Again, only possible on the play. Now, as far as what to take away with your Scavenging Ooze, or when to use your Nile Spellbomb, stuff like that, this can also be pretty unintuitive. And zooming back out to the strategic perspective, we do have to kind of pick a lane early on, much of the time. Will we be taking away and answering the Dredge cards themselves, or we'll be taking away and answering the enablers? Not the enablers, the payoffs. So, in theory, there is a world in which they dredge and they dredge and they dredge, and you answer every payoff, and they eventually just kind of mill themselves almost out of the game and don't really do anything. And then there's an alternative universe in which they find a dredge card or 2, get them into the graveyard, you're able to take those away, and they're not really able to dredge. So both of these kind of interaction paths are routes to victory, but your task as the interactive player is to determine, okay, which path is more likely to yield victory. Here's a pretty random example. Let's say your opponent has a pretty nutty turn 1, they fill up their graveyard a lot, you have a turn 1 Nile Spellbomb on the draw, you just crack it, get rid of all their graveyard effects, or all their cards in the graveyard, rather, and force them to rebuild. You don't get to draw off it, but you've kind of staved off the nutty turn 2. And let's say, just for the sake of argument, that they had put like 2 Bloodghasts and 3 Prized Amalgams into the graveyard, and you sweep them all away. It is then very profitable for you to, if you have limited resources from there, like maybe you have a Scooz and you don't have other ways to fully wipe the graveyard, you can be more judicious with your Scooz activations and plan to only try to answer the payoffs because you have already exiled so many. And the opposite incentive is true. If they happen to put like 1 million Dredge cards in, you clear them all out, well, then maybe you don't need to panic at the very first sight of a Bloodghast or something because, are they really going to beat you with just a little bit of recursion, or do they need major Dredge action to really bury you? And if they have relatively few Dredge cards left in the deck, well, then you can attack that vulnerability. Zooming in to tactical considerations, if you answer, for example, Creeping Chill while its when ability is on the stack, you do not get Helix. So it says when Creeping Chill is put into your graveyard from your library, you may exile it. If you do, deal 3, gain 3, right? So when that triggered ability goes on the stack, you can activate Scooz targeting it, you can crack your spell bomb, you can do whatever, and the chill will effectively fizzle. It will be exiled. The opponent will then not have a chance to exile it themselves, and therefore no Helix for you. Narcomoeba also has a when effect, Bloodghast as well, but note that Bloodghast is a May. And also note that Bloodghast can actually be triggered multiple times. If they play a land out of hand, for example, but have a fetch land uncracked. The Bloodghast trigger will go on the stack when the land is played from hand. If you respond with a Skooz activation or something like that, then they can respond by cracking a fetch land. The trigger will then go on the stack a second time, so Bloodghast can be a little bit trickier to sequence against, but once you're used to playing against it, you know what to look for. Just something to keep in mind, though. And Prized Amalgam has a delayed trigger, so if something weird is happening and they are basically getting the first trigger on the stack on an end step, this will not actually enter the battlefield until the next end step. So if something happens, if a bunch of action happens on the stack, for example, on the Dredge player's end step, maybe you can answer other things, then untap, then have the luxury of another turn to deal the Prized Amalgams. Again, we're thinking of mana-intensive effects like Scavenging Ooze here more than anything else. So, also tactical considerations against these cards if they do manage to hit the battlefield. Prized Amalgam is the heavy infantry. It is slow. It's also it's slow because unlike Narcomoeba, it doesn't have evasion. Unlike Bloodghast, it does not have haste. And it also enters the battlefield tapped. Very important when you're kind of racing and evaluating who will win the race if X, Y, and Z happens. Remember that the Amalgams come back tapped. Remember that Bloodghast cannot block ever. So these are two vulnerabilities in terms of, you think that Dredge has all of this ability to flood the board with recursive creatures. They actually don't block that well against early Goyfs, against big early Skoozes. You can definitely, surprisingly, win a good amount of races that way. That said, Stinkweed Imp is an amazing blocker against mid-range decks. You absolutely have to respect that. Hardcasting Stinkweeds in the mid-game is a very respectable play pattern from them. And that's another reason I don't mind, your Fatal Pushes, your Abrupt Decays in this matchup. They obviously need to be paired with some way to sweep up the graveyard after it. But assuming that, they are actually sometimes critical toward winning if it's a close game at all. Narcomoeba, note that it's not recursive. You can deal with it and feel okay about doing it as long as it hasn't dealt too much damage to you thus far as cheating other things into play. Note also that Plague Engineer Naming Illusion totally wipes these guys out, and every now and then that will be the line, but more often than not, you'll want to name either Vampire or Spirit with Bloodghast. These other cards don't see much play anymore, but if the opponent is on a one of Haunted Dead, for example, you can name Spirit with Bloodghast, also hose the Haunted Dead token. Conversely, if your OP is on Insolent Neonate, again, not very common, you can name Vampire, hose Neonates while you're hosing Bloodghasts, but Bloodghast is usually the card to name. It is down to a 3 of, though, it's not as attractive as it was if it would be a 4 of. Just like with Narcomoeba, occasionally you can lock out their Golgari Thugs. This is probably better if you've already, exiled or extracted a lot of the other Dredge cards, right? You don't exactly want to kill the Golgari Thug most of the time, but sometimes it can be really good. And also note that when Golgari Thug dies, put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library is not a may. So, the good use case for this for Dredge players is generally put an Narcomoeba on top, Dredge again, and then if they've got a bunch of other stuff in the graveyard, Narcomoeba will bring it all back for free. That's definitely something you want to avoid, one way or another. Not killing the Thug, waiting to attack into the Thug, maybe dealing with the Narcomoeba out of the graveyard somehow before you do allow the Thug's ability to resolve, but this can also be used to your advantage, forcing them to put a creature that they don't actually necessarily want on the top of the deck, maybe Thug itself, right? This can almost lock them in their own little bit of a closed containment loop, right? And that you can use that to your advantage if you're ahead on board. Ox of Agonis, like I've said multiple times already, you just want to keep the graveyard as clear as possible of any cards and all cards, more than anything for Ox. And a very difficult card to beat when resolved if the Dredge player is at all close. Conflagrate you have to respect because it is not only a major enabler, it is a board wipe, and our creatures are small early on. If you think about losing a Bob and a Skooz to a Conflagrate while they get to put even one desirable card in the graveyard off of it, that is an absolute back-breaking moment. You will probably not recover from that, so Conflagrate definitely one to kind of game out, right? Keep in mind, Life from the Loam, again, a big enabler for Conflagrate. Their hands usually won't be very big in the mid to late game without a Life from the Loam or two being cast, and that's when Conflagrate gets really, really dangerous. On the sideboard, we've already kind of covered it, but one final thing to note is Blast Zone will probably come in against you, especially if you're on Rock, but against mid-range in general, they probably want this, and therefore, all else being equal, just remember it exists, you know? If it's a board stall, maybe you don't need to play that third Tarmogoyf, right? You know, and you're just begging to get blown out by Blast Zone, you know? Just keep it in mind, respect it, but ultimately, the game usually hinges upon other axes than that. And one final strategic concern, my friends, is as follows. I tend to follow these play patterns. If I am on the play against Dredge, I like to use discard T1 almost no matter what. Definitely more than like playing a Hex Drinker or something, but even more than running out like Spellbomb or Grafdigger's Cage on turn 1. If I'm on the play, I'm clearing the way with discard. The exception to this is if the opponent took a Deep Maul, you know, to 5 it becomes sketchy, to 4 or less I probably won't do it, because the last thing you want to do is like Thoughtseize a 2-land, 2 Stinkweed Imp hand, and then you just allowed them to go off when they were going absolutely nowhere. But if they keep 7, if they keep 6, and I'm on the play, I'm going to lead on discard, and this is why. You absolutely have a turn. It is safe to take a turn off of playing your Graveyard Hate, or sometimes your Graveyard Hate is a 2-drop or a 3-drop like Skuz or Ashiok, and you couldn't play at T1 anyway. But whether or not you have the choice, you do have a turn, because turn 2 is the big go-off turn for Dredge. And even if it's not, even if turn 1 they could start going off with Shriekhorn, well, that's even better. You get to answer the Shriekhorn. But more accurately, or perhaps more often, you're having to take Cathartic Green, and it is their best enabler, or you are having to take away Nature's Claim or Lightning Axe, these sideboard cards that can beat your hate. However, if you're on the draw, spending turn 1 casting a discard spell, while it's still better than having nothing to do at all, and still better than like running out a Hex Drinker, it is absolutely way, way worse to spend that T1 doing so. If I'm T1 on the draw, I am playing my Grafdigger's Cage or my Nile Spellbomb out on T1, and I am saying make them have it. There is a world of difference here between being on the play and on the draw in terms of how your strategy should follow. I have had success following those broad play patterns in the past, and I do advise you to do the same. But as always, my friends, anything else you want to share, anything you disagree with, please do let me know. And that's about that. So thank you once again to Mark, thank you to all Patreon supporters, and thank you, the viewer, for watching Fun Times with Dredge, and I will see you for the next Grim gameplay. Take care.